knock the door down here. It's about Kyle Bradish, right? So let's just get to it. You were spot on with your analysis on the PRP, and for everyone here that's probably going to wonder, Bradish went on the IL. This looks like it's it. It looks like, Yoni, surgery is the option here. Can you just kind of walk through the process? Because essentially for Bradish, this was almost a ticking time bomb, unfortunately, for that UCL.
Yeah, absolutely. So this happens quite frequently where an athlete will go out, they'll strain a ligament. In this case, it's the UCL. One of the opportunities that you have is to do something called PRP, where they pull out the athlete's blood, they spin down the blood, they take the healing factors of our blood, and they put it right back on the site that is injured. In this case, it was the UCL. And then you hope, you pray that that UCL uses those healing factors and begins to knit itself back together. And then stability is restored through the joint, and then they can go about their lives. Unfortunately, in my experience, it's usually more of a Band-Aid. So the athlete will get marginally better, maybe all the way back to where they were, but that underlying tissue, that ligament, usually does not come back as strong as pre-injury. And that's unfortunately what it sounds like we're seeing now.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that Birdland's probably going, well, why didn't he get this taken care of then? Why didn't you just get the surgery? Can you just kind of talk about, obviously you're saying if it's a Band-Aid, why didn't they? But in your mind then, well, why would they hold off? If we play this situation out, how long could that short-term PRP have lasted in this case?
Yeah, now sometimes you see athletes bounce back. You know that as soon as you open up that elbow, if you do a Tommy John, then you're looking at 12 to 14 months. If you do a UCL repair, which is what we call an internal brace, it can be as little as 9 months, but you're hoping it holds. But once you cut that elbow open, it's 9 to 12 months that they're definitely on the shelf. And, you want to throw everything at it before you start repairing things.
Yeah, and that was the case then, correct me if I'm wrong, Felix Bautista, you mentioned that before. Same thing where in that case, if Felix had the same kind of response that Kyle did, then the Orioles were hoping Felix would have pitched in the playoffs, and he possibly could have been available if he had the same prognosis or healing that Kyle did initially.
Yeah, exactly right. I think also they were hoping that it would get them good enough for as long as they could. In that case, it would have gotten them maybe through the playoffs. Obviously, that didn't work out. But you want to throw everything at the athlete before you start cutting them open.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I know it's not something that this is crushing Zach's day, Yoni, as always, but
it's hard. I was so happy for Kyle Bradish. And I mean, Yoni, you did warn us. You said from the beginning, this was kind of like a ticking time bomb. It was like, you really hope that it can get him through this season, but it's not something of the day he showed up back on the mound, it wasn't, oh, boom, he's done. He's good. He's good to go. There's no injury. And I think that's what sucked is how well he was pitching. And you talked about, they can return to their current, top form, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, the elbow's totally good. You're good to go. It still always was in the back of our minds of any pitch at this point. So that's what was hard to watch and scary to watch his starts.
It is hard and it is scary. It's also of note that the elbow is not really designed to withstand this force, and it's almost a miracle that it ever works. So every time a pitcher goes out there and they're throwing 96 to 100, you're kind of playing with fire. Obviously, it's fire you have to play with in order to get the results that you want. But yes, certainly once you start seeing that PRP and people start complaining about their UCL, 9 out of 10 times they end up under the knife.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kevin, that kind of leads into another question with this timeline.
Yeah, Yoni, I mean, you had mentioned it when we talked the first time, but in terms of how this all played out for Kyle Bradish, was this kind of, did this whole situation happen sooner than you would have maybe anticipated? Were you maybe expecting him to last a little longer with his injury? Or did you think that this was maybe right on schedule about, this is a ticking time bomb here and it could explode at any moment? When did you expect anything like this to happen?
The truth is it's a crapshoot. I saw him get back on the mound and I saw him be dominant with velo numbers that were as high as they were before. So I was thinking, okay, like maybe this PRP did take. Unfortunately, it obviously didn't. It's also, he came back earlier in the year, right? We start stacking starts and he gets to his third start, and that cumulative effect really starts to take hold. So I'm not shocked. I wouldn't have been shocked if he made it till September. I wouldn't have been shocked if he got back on the mound and his third pitch in, it goes. You just never know.
That's just the reality of this. And I think that I wanted people to understand this is how fragile the pitching lifestyle is, and especially nowadays. And this is nothing that Kyle did specifically. It's nothing that you can really control. It's truly a crapshoot that we're talking about. Now, Kevin, do you want to be Mr. Optimist here in this situation? Try to be.
So I will try. Yoni, I think the question everybody wants to know is, again, there's a lot of uncertainty right now surrounding the situation in terms of what next steps will be for Kyle Bradish. And so in terms of a best case versus worst case, you can kind of run everybody through what a best case scenario would look like with this, and then obviously what the worst case would as well.
Yeah, provided he's going to have some type of UCL surgery, you have two options. One, you have the tried and true Tommy John surgery. And so what they do with that is they're actually reconstructing a ligament. They're not repairing it. And that it depends on doctor preference. It depends the actual type of tear, where in the ligament it's torn, how much bony damage. But that would be, let's call it worst case scenario, where he gets Tommy John surgery. There you're looking at an 80 to 90% success rate that he will return to the previous level of function. But you're also looking at a 12 to 14 month rehab process. That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario, he tore it a certain way, or they go in there and they realize that they can do a repair. They don't have to do a reconstruction. So it does two things. One, you're not pulling a ligament out of another piece of the body or a tendon out of another piece of the body and transferring it. So you don't have to wait for that to repair or heal itself. But also, because they're keeping a lot of the natural tissue there, the recovery rates are much faster. There you're looking at 7 to 8 months back on the mound in games. So everything gets sped up. If he goes with an internal brace, it'll be doctor dependent. It'll be tear dependent.
Well, there we go. So we're looking at roughly, regardless, earliest time. Let's just say let's just round it around, average a year over a year.
Yeah.
Is what we're looking at.
Sure.
I think it's minimum 7.5 months, maximum 14 months.
So somewhere in the best case scenario. But so again, it's there's so many different outcomes, and it does depend. You're only right about how the athlete's going to respond in the process too, and that's, I think, the part that people don't always understand. There can be complications.